So it's been a bit of a long week for me in the UK just because of the heat wave being so brutal at the start of the week. And this is actually my third day in a row of planning, recording, and by the time you see this, obviously editing, uploading, making the thumbnail, all that stuff. So very, very busy. I'm very tired. And I thought for like the third video, since I put like a lot more effort into researching the other two videos this week, we should talk about something I have maybe stronger feelings on, but a lot of you guys will be fairly familiar with. So I've got my Monster Energy in a Starbucks cup because I love capitalism to get me through this. I am recording about midnight on Friday, so that should be fun. I'm going to be out early tomorrow as well. And today we're going to be talking about, I guess, the old saying, scratch a lib and a fash bleeds. And basically what this video is going to do is analyse why Joe Rogan, J.K. Rowling, and to a lesser extent, because we're not going to talk about him as much, Elon Musk have all been pandering to the far right in recent years. Now, of course, there are multiple different reasons. These people all live in like very different scenarios. I guess the one thing uniting them all is they are all insanely wealthy. And I guess in recent years, all of them have also become egomaniacs as well, although that was probably always there. But all of these people have been known for at least espousing centrist beliefs or centre-left beliefs or liberal beliefs in the past. And sadly, there are actually a load of Joe Rogan simps on the left who refused to criticise him because he had Bernie Sanders on his show like one time 3 years ago. So apparently he's some sort of socialist despite disproportionately platforming far-right figures on his show and often just sitting there while they rant or agreeing with everything they say. So we're going to be looking at all three of these people today and ask ourselves, why do seemingly liberal people seem so happy to either regurgitate far-right talking points or ally themselves with the far-right itself in pursuing, I guess, their own ideological agenda? All of that coming up, but like the video, and I guess for today's comments, have you ever been turned off by either these three people or other people who were either liberal or seemed liberal, but then started basically allying themselves with conservatives or the far right? Let me know down in the comments. Also, follow me on social media at the Kavernacle on Twitter, on Instagram. Check out my subreddit down in the description. Also, consider supporting me on Patreon. I want to build up as many $1 to $3 patrons as possible, and the benefits of that are getting access to my Nintendo Switch friend code and the private patrons Discord server. For every 5k, we get a new chocolate orange. Help me keep chugging along to 80k so we can get another one. Also, subscribe to my second channel, the Kavernacle Extra, where I archive my live streams, and hopefully I will start doing them again next week. I actually might do a gaming one at the weekend at some point. So I guess in this video, we should start with Joe Rogan. Now, I made a whole video about Joe Rogan and how his subreddit turned on him. I believe this was back in May. So if you want something more in depth and focused on him specifically, maybe go check that out. But basically, I just want to talk about Rogan's liberal reputation from like my perspective. So I started listening to Joe Rogan, not like every episode, but a couple of them, I think back in 2016. When I was more liberal leaning, I would say there was a lot of leftist elements to me, but I was more like rational liberal. So I would watch a lot of like podcasts where I didn't necessarily agree with everything people were saying, but I thought it was important to like kind of take in these ideas. And I think because I was pretty into atheism for a time before I realized it was Western chauvinism, I think that naturally set me up to kind of consume Joe Rogan's content because he had people like Sam Harris on, but he also did have people like Carl Kalinske on, David Pakman. I think this was a bit later, but older episodes of like Cenk and Anna from the Young Turks. So even if you were like more liberal leftist, there were a reason to follow Joe Rogan's show and listen to certain episodes. Of course, I stayed far away from like episodes with Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson, but there were like seemingly redeeming qualities about him in that he would at least entertain, I guess, some more normalized positions, especially from European countries. Like universal healthcare is one example. And then also with him platforming people like Elon Musk and Andrew Yang, who are big advocates for UBI, he also started saying things like we should have UBI. And he also said he would probably vote for Bernie Sanders.
I've never voted right-wing in my life. I consider universal basic income a really good idea. I want free college education.
Take it easy.
Hello, Bernie.
How are you, Joe?
Wonderful. Pleasure to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I like Tulsi and I like Bernie. I think I'll probably vote for Bernie. I think he's looking out for the interests of the working people. And I think he wants people to have a better life and do better. And I'm all for that. I'm very women's rights, civil rights, gay rights, trans rights. I'm even universal health care.
Now, I'm not saying he was perfect. I'm not saying he didn't endorse a lot of reactionary takes, and as time went on, when the culture war against the trans community started ramping up, he of course jumped on the side of the transphobes, but kind of masked it in his concern for the sanctity of competitive sports. So Joe Rogan could appeal to lots of different people through both platforming political people, but also getting on interesting guests, like the Oliver Stone interview I enjoyed because I went out and bought Oliver Stone's book, which was, you know, a great read. No matter what you think of him, he's an amazing writer, and his autobiography was no different. So I thought Joe Rogan had value, but I think multiple things have made Joe Rogan slide from being more liberal leaning and at least being able to entertain liberal ideas to literally being like your uncle on Facebook, your boomer uncle, because that's how right-wing he has shifted. Now, I believe it's for multiple reasons, and I'm going to get into recent stuff he has said in the last like month or so, which are like totally insane. But basically, I think it's two things. At the start of the pandemic, he actually platformed a doctor who told people what to expect, really got into the science, and I thought that was so good of him because a lot of his fans, I assumed, would be very skeptical of things to do with the science because they are into, I don't know, bodybuilding, which is pretty notorious for medical misinformation and not trusting traditional health measures. So I thought that was very, very good. And he also said stuff like he enjoyed lockdown because he got to spend time with his family and just chill. But then I think he realized as a rich person, he could create an environment where he himself was safe, but he didn't necessarily face the hardships that many people ran into or fear for their job or their safety. And I think he just got bored pretty quickly and quickly turned into a skeptic of many things, but including medical misinformation, and started railing against that in late 2020, early 2021. Of course, he actually caught the disease himself and threw everything at it. Totally a guy who wasn't scared of actually catching this in the first place. But because the right in America made this a whole culture war where Fauci was getting death threats from conservatives and they were just literally making this a political talking point, he found a natural home with a conservative audience. And while he always had a conservative audience, now they were people who were really driving his ego by agreeing with everything he said. And as he platformed more and more far-right guests, they enjoyed that even more. And like I said, his whole subreddit has pretty much turned on him because he did used to have fairly liberal fans who are now like, you are literally some 50-year-old conservative boomer. You're not the person you were, I guess, 5 or 6 years ago. And of course, he had that 200 million Spotify deal. So he also got far richer, moved to Texas, and who has been promoting Joe Rogan since then? It's conservatives. And this guy seems to have got a higher opinion of himself because I think in his head he thinks he is like a voice of reason, challenging the establishment, challenging traditional medical science, and he believes he's some sort of like voice that people should rally behind. And I think he believes, because people are telling him how great he is for doing this, he kind of just believes that stuff and he's enjoying it, being seen as someone who is, I guess, supposedly some sort of thought leader now, rather than just a guy who was like your 27-year-old brother who was a loser, who just told you conspiracies about Mayans and stuff. And because Joe Rogan is so rich and privileged, he can say he endorses people like Ron DeSantis because he doesn't have to fear the social repercussions. Like, Ron DeSantis has this far-right agenda that he is putting into practice in Florida itself, including Don't Say Gay, which Joe Rogan actually agreed with on his podcast. But Joe Rogan doesn't have to suffer any of that, first of all, because he's not from Florida. But even if DeSantis became president, it wouldn't really matter to him. He's so rich, he can do what he wants. And on that note, I want to get into his more far-right positions that he's espousing now. So here is him with Gina Carano talking about why Ron DeSantis would actually make a very good president of the US.
Didn't Elon Musk come out recently for DeSantis?
Yeah, I think Ron DeSantis would work as a good president. I mean, what he's done for Florida has been admirable.
Look I feel like I'm doing breaking news right now. That wasn't even on purpose.
I feel like what he did for Florida, a lot of people gave him a lot of grief, but ultimately he was correct. He was correct when it comes to like deaths. He was correct when it comes to protecting our vulnerable populations. He was correct in terms of distribution of monoclonal antibodies. And he was furious when the government tried to pull those. They were trying to pull very effective treatments. You know, he is not perfect. He's a human being. But what he's done is stand up for freedoms. And people think that so this was some weird gaslighting shit that went on where people equated freedom and saying the word freedom to like right-wing bigotry and hate is so strange.
So Joe Rogan just isn't a very smart person. He's projecting, I guess, his own beliefs on Ron DeSantis. Like, Ron DeSantis did rail against pandemic restrictions. Florida did not handle it well. His administration consistently covered up the number of cases, deaths, all those different things. Joe Rogan obviously does not know that because he's just seeing Ron DeSantis in the media and being like, well, he probably agrees with my stance on all these things, therefore he's my guy. Like, how do you go from supporting Bernie Sanders to Ron DeSantis in like 2 years? It's literally the completely different side of the ideological spectrum. But of course, it's because the pandemic has broken this guy's brain. He's inherently really, really selfish, a knucklehead susceptible to medical misinformation who thinks he is smart for questioning traditional medical science. And this is the end result where he's endorsing a far-right GOP governor for the next president of the United States. And if you think Donald Trump was bad, Ron DeSantis is going to be far worse because, although incompetent in his own way, is far more competent than Donald Trump ever was. Now, the pandemic melt in his brain has also led him to hate Justin Trudeau for Trudeau's response to the trucker convoy, that honourable fight for freedom in Canada. And Joe Rogan last week called Justin Trudeau a communist. Because if you want to act like a 50-year-old boomer, then calling elitist, neoliberal prime ministers of capitalist nations communists is probably a good way to go.
Canada's communist.
Canada's crazy.
They got to get rid of that guy.
How much time does he have? I feel like he's been prime minister for a while. Am I wrong?
I don't know. I don't know how their system works up there. I have zero understanding of their system.
Yeah.
I never looked into it at all. I liked him. I liked him before the pandemic.
Trudeau?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, he's a handsome guy.
Yeah.
Seems sweet.
Yeah.
You know, it's like good looking guy, confident, good talker.
Yeah.
And then during the pandemic, I'm like, oh, you're a dictator.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't like criticism. You're trying to shut down criticism by saying that all your critics are misogynists and racists.
Yeah.
You hear he said that about the trucking people, the truckers?
He called them
all misogynists and racists.
Oof.
Yeah, he's gross. He's a sketchy guy.
Okay, so admittedly, Joe Rogan says he doesn't know anything about Canada. Maybe you shouldn't call Trudeau a communist. I do love the thought that Trudeau is a communist dictator because he's an elected leader who's won elections, but he calls his critics like racists and bigots because, as we all know, communist dictators normally suppress opposition by calling people bigots. But of course, what Joe Rogan is trying to do here is basically communist as a stand-in for authoritarian dictatorship. Obviously, that is not true at all, but it's a popular thing in right-wing circles in America, and of course, many right-wing places across the world, even like liberal places. I wouldn't be surprised to hear liberals call Donald Trump a communist dictator or something like that, because that's how Americans understand communism. Their brain's still rotted from the Cold War. But I think this clip tells you everything you need to know, right? Most American conservatives would say that Joe Rogan's positions before on UBI and universal healthcare were communist. Joe Rogan was seemingly to the left of Joe Biden, and a lot of American conservatives called Joe Biden a communist. So for him to not realise that most of the people he's allying himself with would also previously probably call him a communist is absolutely ridiculous, but shows how far he's fallen, because he has this one agenda and he'll happily ally with the far right, including the far right in Canada, and that's why he hates Trudeau, that's why he likes DeSantis, that's why he likes Greg Abbott, that's why he's pandering to the far right, because for some reason or another, there are plenty of reasons, he just does not want health restrictions, and that has severely radicalized him. And here's a guy who still pretends he's a liberal, he's said it recently as well, but if he is some sort of weird liberal, he still has very far right beliefs on some issues. And I think he's a good case study of just how capitalist liberals will always choose the far right over the left, no matter what. It's all about capital at the end of the day. That's what Joe Rogan cares about. He cares about his freedom to make money, spend money, his freedom to participate in a consumer capitalist lifestyle without any restrictions. Therefore, he's happy to pander to the far right, ally himself to the far right, because in his mind, even people like Trudeau, centrist prime ministers of capitalist nations, are actually communists for putting in like some health restrictions. I have a feeling Joe Rogan is going to get even worse, but it's clear that the pandemic is his reason from turning from Bernie to DeSantis, from liberal to American-style conservative. Now, J.K. Rowling is another example. Of course, her radicalization, I don't know if that's the right word, it just seems like she has chosen to die on the hill of being a TERF. But she's in a similar position where she was like this centrist liberal type in the UK. And we're going to run through her political history as well. And then over the last couple years, she has not only become a TERF, which is very common in supposed liberal feminism in the UK, she's happy to actually ally with mask-off far-right types as well, who aren't saying they're liberal feminists in the UK. They're literally saying, I'm a theocratic fascist, and here is my transphobic film that's been advertised on every political YouTube channel, and apparently J.K. Rowling likes that. So unlike Joe Rogan, I don't have as much of like an experience of J.K. Rowling. I never really liked the Harry Potter books. The movies growing up were like great as a teenager and a kid, but she wasn't heavily involved with the movies themselves, not like the Fantastic Beasts movies, which she actually writes the screenplay for. No wonder they are absolute trash, some of the worst movies out there. But she's always just been the lady who wrote Harry Potter, and looking back now and reading some pages of Harry Potter, I don't even think Harry Potter is very good. Like, I mean, the world is creative, and I think the movies elevate source material that has got a reputation for being better than it is just because the movies are so good. But let's get into her political history. So this was a good article on Politico by Sarah Wheaton, The Metamorphosis of J.K. Rowling. So when someone asked her if she was willing to ruin her legacy, she says, "Yes, sweetheart, I'm staying right here on this hill, defending the right of women and girls to talk about themselves, their bodies, and their lives in any way they damn well please. You worry about your legacy, I'll worry about mine." For most of her career, Rowling sat politically in the milquetoast centre left. In a speech to Harvard grads in 2008, she described her first job out of university at Amnesty International, where the personal testimonies of African political prisoners stirred her soul. She told the Ivy League graduates that their elite status and influence is your privilege and your burden, and exhorted them to use it on behalf of those who have no voice. In 2010, she wrote movingly of having relied on the welfare state when her life hit rock bottom, explaining why she was happy to keep paying British taxes. This, if you like, is my notion of patriotism. Indisputably, Rowling has been extraordinarily generous. She famously gave so much to charity in 2011, 16% of her net worth, that she was knocked off the Forbes billionaire list next year. How tragic. Most recently, she pledged to match up to £1 million in donations for vulnerable children in Ukraine. When it comes to politics, Rowling hasn't hesitated to invoke her fiction to talk about her real-world views or to issue clarifications in defense of the moral legacy of the world she created. In 2007, a few weeks after the seventh and final installment of Harry Potter, she announced that Hogwarts' beloved headmaster Dumbledore was gay and had fallen in love with a fellow wizard. In 2015, when the black British actor Noma Dumezweni was cast to play Hermione Granger in a play, Rowling tweeted, "Rowling loves black Hermione," noting that the text had never specified the character's skin colour. Rowling's views have until recently, however, when she waded into electoral politics, it has typically been in defence of the status quo, a fact that has caused increasing tension with her younger progressive fan base. During the debate over Scottish independence, Rowling fell behind those advocating to remain in the UK and donated £1 million to that effort. 2 years later, with another referendum on the horizon, she waded into Brexit in defence of staying in the EU, saying that she's not an expert in much but does know how to create a monster. She compared the villainous spectre of the EU evoked by the Leave campaign to Hannibal Lecter, Big Brother and Voldemort. After the Brexit campaign, she turned her fire on Jeremy Corbyn. I do remember this. Responding to a tweet by a fan who described Corbyn as political Dumbledore, she said, "I forgot Dumbledore trashed Hogwarts, refused to resign, and ran off to the forest to make speeches to angry trolls." A month later, as it became clear that Corbyn would fend off a post-Brexit vote leadership contest, she responded to another tweet saying Corbyn is not Dumbledore. The Harry Potter author's first foray into the trans rights debate was ambiguous, a like on a tweet that she later described as accidental. The March 2018 tweet in question was by a Labour Party activist, and it referred to trans women as men in dresses. Rowling's liking of it was set upon by LGBTQ activists as evidence of transphobia, which she described as a clumsy and middle-aged moment, saying it was an accident, which we would come to know wasn't much of an accident. If any of you are English and you're watching this and you're terminally online, there's this lady called Frances Wheatman. Now, the only reason I'd ever heard about her is that she was a rabid anti-Corbyn activist when he was the leader of the Labour Party. And I kind of forgot about her completely, but then randomly she popped up the other day, and also now she's a rabid TERF. And I assume this is something that has been happening to a lot of liberals who hated Jeremy Corbyn. And hating Jeremy Corbyn is a big red flag. I actually tweeted something the other day saying Jeremy Corbyn was more left-wing than Bernie Sanders, and Americans were setting upon me with anti-Corbyn rhetoric, which I did find quite funny. That supposed American leftists had bought into all the right-wing propaganda about Corbyn from the UK. But in my video talking about her literally calling out Vosh and Mike from the Humanist Report, I think Vosh said something like, J.K. Rowling is just like right-wing or far-right. And I think that ignores a very important aspect of J.K. Rowling and liberal feminism in the UK, is that liberal feminism in the UK is inherently, at the moment, transphobic. It's not like a far-right ideology, although the far-right do believe in transphobia as well, and conservatives do as well. At the moment, the mainstream liberal position in the UK is to pretty much be a TERF. You have people in the Labour Party like Angela Rayner and Emily Thornberry who aren't TERFs, but Keir Starmer won't talk about it. Tony Blair said, don't get involved in that stuff. Plenty of people in the Labour Party have supported J.K. Rowling. It is sadly not a position in liberal feminism that is uncommon, unlike in the US, where liberals are far better at supporting social causes. They're just extremely backwards when it comes to economic policy. Although with the recent right-wing takeover of the Labour Party, I'd say the current Labour Party aren't actually better than the Democrats in pretty much any way. So there you could see, for a political history, pretty much centre-left, like the article said, propping up the status quo. Patriotic, believes that this liberal version of England is worth defending from scary communist Jeremy Corbyn. Don't let Scotland break away. And they've been treated so well since that referendum. I hope they do get independence, and I hope they are allowed to have another referendum. But yeah, it's honestly not surprising. But they will defend themselves and say, we support LGBT rights, we even support transgender rights, we just don't want this to undermine women, because to them, transgender women aren't actually women. And with that in mind, it's very easy to see how they can fall to the far right, who do feel the same about transgender women, but they actually feel the same about the whole LGBT community as well. And here is the evidence. Recently, J.K. Rowling has said she likes far-right political commentator for the Daily Wire, Matt Walsh's film, What is a Woman? Transphobic propaganda that Google and YouTube have decided is allowed to run on every video. I would not be surprised if you've seen an ad for it on my video today. But I want to get into the conversation that inspired her to say she supports this film. Matt Walsh replying to this, sorry, but women who publicly renounce the definition of woman for fear of mean comments from trans activists deserve all the scorn they get. That kind of gutless cowardice is exactly what got us into this position in the first place. And then J.K. Rowling quote tweeting that, sorry, this is a bit of a rabbit hole. Endless threats of loss of livelihood, employers targeted, physical harassment, family addresses posted. If you don't yet understand what happens to women who stand up to this issue, back off. Yes, I feel so bad, liberal feminists and the far right attacking one of the most marginalised groups in Western society. Then this other guy chimes in, respectfully, you need to fall back and support men like Matt Walsh. You're not built for this conflict. The failure and cowardice of men got us into this mess. Matt is standing up. You need to support him. Men have to fix this. J.K. Rowling saying, respectfully, I've been facing down the punch TERFs brigade for a while now, and not once have I thought what I really want is to hand this over to a man who thinks feminism is one of the worst things to happen to Western civilization. Okay. Like many women on the left, you're not on the left, I despair that so many self-proclaimed liberals turn a blind eye to the naked misogyny of the gender identity movement and the threat it poses to the rights of women and girls. Walsh's film undeniably exposed that many leftists are too scared to. Walsh believes feminism is rotten and his default appears to be denigrating women whom he disagrees with. He's no more on my side than trans activists. Then he replies, I respect the courage you've shown on this issue, but many people have simply caved to the demands of trans activists and completely surrendered truth and reality to them. The cowards are also villains in this story. They need to be held accountable. And your film did a good job exposing the incoherence of gender identity theory and some of the harms it's done. Many institutions I used to admire have uncritically embraced this dogma, but I reserve my ire for them rather than shouting coward at individual women. Now, you can see in that she's trying to convince herself that I'm still for feminism. I'm still a liberal feminist. I reject Matt Walsh's ideology while complimenting his film, which is completely consumed by his ideology. Again, how does that work? Let me know in the comments. Do you think she actually realizes who she's allying herself with? Or she's so much in this own bubble that she seriously thinks that you can be like anti-transgender, but also some sort of feminist, and that most people on your side aren't actually far-right types who hate feminism? Because this is a more interesting case to me than Joe Rogan, who seems to think he's a liberal, but he's just a total knucklehead. J.K. Rowling seems to actually have a clear ideology. She's perfectly happy to ally with anyone who supports her agenda, and if that is of detriment to other feminists around the world, even TERFs, for example, then that's okay, because she's so rich, just like Joe Rogan, this is never really going to blow up in her face. She's too rich to really be affected by a lot of these issues, and that's what obviously makes her a worse person, is that she has this privilege and she uses her platform and her privilege just to punch down on one of the most marginalized people around and stir up hatred against them, like truly a disgusting person. But there you can see how liberal capitalists and liberals who want to uphold the capitalist status quo will ally themselves with the far right to maintain that status quo. They do not like people like Jeremy Corbyn. They do not like transgender activists who want to make life better for trans people who face so many hurdles in their life. She's just a complete narcissist who, just like Joe Rogan, thinks she's like this voice that needs to speak up against some sort of perceived tyranny. In Joe Rogan's case, that is medical restrictions. In J.K. Rowling's case, that is accepting trans women are women. Truly one of the most totalitarian things we could ever do in Western society. And of course I tend to think she's more of like a true believer in that she's happy to throw away her entire legacy and make all her fans hate her. Make great actors who starred in her movies hate her and distance themselves from her, despite the fact that a lot of them, like Daniel Radcliffe, seemingly had some sort of personal friendship with her as well. She doesn't care. She's perfectly happy just to become known for being a TERF, and that's it. I think it's been a process. Like, I think she obviously was a TERF, but she wasn't as public about it. But as she got more public about it, she's probably thinking like, oh, why can't my fans like realize what I'm saying and like realize why I'm right? And then as people very publicly turned against her, including, you know, Daniel Radcliffe and other actors in the Harry Potter series, including, you know, Emma Watson as well, and I think she just realized, oh, these people are going away. They won't like me. Even in universities, they've renamed, I think, Quidditch to quadball to distance themselves from her, because younger generations are far more accepting of trans people. And then she has this new audience of Mumsnet fanatics, middle-aged liberal feminists, and they're the people going to be buying her work, which is fueled by her political ideology. So then she's now just pandering to this new crowd she has got, and just doesn't even really care about the old fans of the Harry Potter books. So that's two case studies of big celebrities who are like out and out liberals, and I think wealth plays into that. And I just want to end the video talking a tiny bit about Elon Musk. Now, Elon Musk, I would never say was a particularly like liberal political guy. He used to say he was some sort of socialist. I don't know if this guy just doesn't really read much. He does post like he's a 14-year-old 4chaner. His sense of humor is very, very juvenile. Doesn't seem like the smartest guy ever, despite his reputation. But of course, because of Tesla being these electric cars, him talking about climate change, him talking about, I don't know, going to Mars and this like more like utopian view of the future, a lot of more like left-leaning people liked him. I'm not talking about like actual leftists who hate capitalism. I'm talking about like centrists who maybe lean a bit left, and they thought Elon Musk was going to lead them to this environmentalist future that they wanted, and he was one of the main people in the world doing this. But of course, now Elon Musk is an absolutely massive right-wing hero. Conservatives love him. Remember when he said he was going to buy Twitter, and all those conservatives came back from their supposed Twitter suspension saying it was because of Elon Musk? It wasn't because of Elon Musk, it's because they deleted the tweets that got them suspended. But they were pretending Elon Musk had brought free speech to Twitter. And Elon Musk's whole pursuit of Twitter has been about pandering to his new right-wing fan base and basically saying, I'm going to make Twitter like 4chan, where you can say anything you want. Because supposedly he's this big libertarian who believes in absolute free speech, although his personal dealings with people practicing their free speech seems to go against the supposed values. But Elon Musk is also pandering to a new crowd. And just like J.K. Rowling to an extent, he's realizing that a lot of his old fan base, like the Big Bang Theory people who might be more left-leaning, they don't like him anymore. Because obviously when the pandemic started, just like with Joe Rogan, he was saying it would end in a month. He was getting very annoyed about lockdowns because he couldn't exploit his workers as easily as before. People would have to work from home, maybe get furlough money. He didn't want that at all. Wanted them back in the office and acted like, the pandemic wasn't a big thing. When the government told him no, then he started pandering to a right-wing audience, because in America, it was the right wing who took up this political, cultural war issue of, we are not going to obey medical science. We are not going to abide by restrictions. I want my personal freedom. I will never do anything to help my fellow man. And Elon Musk and Joe Rogan capitalize on this. And now, just like Joe Rogan, Elon Musk is saying he will also vote for Ron DeSantis as well. And although Elon Musk wasn't as like outwardly liberal as the other two, and I think he's just a good indicator to show you why liberals will always choose the far right over the far left. Like with the far left, we want to challenge the status quo. We want to abolish capitalism for many of us. We want to fundamentally reorganize society in a way that makes everyone equal. But these rich liberals and just general wealthy liberals are not interested in that. They like their lives. They like the status quo. They want to protect the status quo, just like J.K. Rowling did with stuff about like the Scottish independence referendum and Jeremy Corbyn. She wants to maintain her place in the economic order, and she wants to maintain her wealth and status. But these people also have some sort of conscience where they want to challenge like social issues. So for J.K. Rowling, because she was like a liberal, she wanted like equality for people, like a vague concept of equality. We've seen how hollow that rings with how she feels about trans people. And that's why she paid lip service to more liberal causes. But maybe conservatism did disgust her and she hated conservatism. But now she's perfectly happy to ally herself with conservatives and acts like the far left are the biggest dangers to society, just like Joe Rogan, just like Elon Musk says as well. Because these people fundamentally like the capitalist status quo. There are things they'd change about it. There are certain things they don't like. There are certain things they wish they could make different. But at the end of the day, it won't really affect them. They're too rich. They're too powerful. Most things that happen will not affect these people's daily lives. While for a lot of us, while we're being exploited and crushed by this capitalist system, which is also making the planet burn and is uninhabitable, we literally had wildfires in London this week. We do not see the human race's existence being compatible with this capitalist system. Therefore, we want to change it. We want to change things associated with it, like patriarchy and other things, because fundamentally, this is what we see and is the truth of our oppression, which we do not share with liberals, but the right wing do share with liberals, that they want to uphold the status quo. The only thing they differ on is what the status quo means in terms of social values and social rights. And that's why the Democrats and Republicans in America are often so similar on most issues, because they don't disagree with America's place in the world. They don't disagree with the economic order. The only thing they disagree with is what social values matter and are important. That is it for the videos. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments, and if you made it this far, thank you for watching.